E oku rangatira, tēnā koutou katoa. We acknowledge that there is strength beyond ourselves when we work together to serve others. May we put aside our own personal interests, work with integrity and openness, striving to create a community that supports its people and the environment. Let us, in a moment of quiet, focus on why we are here. We give thanks for the wisdom of the past, look for opportunities in the present, and accept the challenges of the future. Tēnei te mihi ki a koutou katoa, kia pai te haere. Welcome everybody to our extraordinary council meeting. We have no apologies today. Good to have a full and good to have more of us all being able to be physically present together, spread across a couple of meeting rooms here at the Cape View Council building. Do we have any conflicts of interest? No, and we don't have any items in the public forum. There is no announcements by myself. Any minor matters not on the agenda?
Madam Mayor, councillors, this is Dean Preble. I think, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Just I wanted to give you an update on the Business Response Fund. Is now the right time to do that?
Just give us 2 seconds. I'll see. Yeah, just after this we will. I'll just see if there's any councillors that are wanting a minor matter, and then we'll open up to management announcements, and that's when you can give us that update. Thank you, Dean.
Okay.
No minor matters, so the floor is yours.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, so the Business Response Fund was launched on Thursday. So I've had a good response so far. We've had 6 applications totaling $32,000. We're just going through those responses now, but I'm expecting about 1/3 of the fund will be granted by the end of this month. Yeah, so listen, the main focus was on projects that help businesses find new product market combinations, new activation ideas, new marketing ideas to increase revenue that they've lost over the COVID-19 period. Yeah, happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from any of the councillors? Councillor Bogue.
Well, thank you for that. Is there a committee that approves the grant allocations, please? And if so, who's on it?
Yes, so I go through the applications and make recommendations, and the committee is Sally and Kirsten. Yep, needs two out of 3 to make it approved.
Thank you.
And so those committee members, myself as the Mayor and Councillor Crown as the Prosperous Napier portfolio holder. If there's no further questions on it, yes, Councillor Simpson.
Yeah, just one question, just following up on Councillor Bogue's question. Will a schedule of grants be made available to council or publicly?
Yes, yes, it will.
Thank you.
Very good. I'd now invite Adele to give us an update on the annual plan and timelines around that.
Thank you, and through the Mayor. So at our last meeting, we were talking about providing an updated timeline around the annual plan as a result of the impacts of COVID. So I can confirm today what our timeline is going to be for consultation. So we're looking at opening up consultation on the 18th of June, and that will run for 4 weeks and close on the 15th of July. Council will be undertaking its hearing process, and that will be done for the 12th and 13th of August. We will be looking to adopt the final annual plan for 2021 on the 27th of August. So it has been delayed this year as a result of the review of impacts of COVID, but we're looking forward to hearing from the community as part of that process, which will open up on the 18th of June. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Bogue.
Just for the sake of the public, thank you, Adele. When the submissions open, they open on the 18th of June, close on the 15th of July. Is it at noon or is it 4 o'clock that they close? Because people sometimes get a bit caught in that deadline. Thank you.
I don't know whether we've actually made that determination yet through the Mayor, but we'll certainly make that clear when we articulate those timeframes.
Oh, thank you.
Adele, just because we're on the public record, could you just also spell out the audit comfort that we've had around that the Office of the Auditor General is perfectly okay for councils to be operating in that space, and with those delays given the statutory obligations in the Local Government Act? Thank you.
Yes, and through the Mayor, and thank you for your comments there, Keith. Yes, we're certainly comfortable with the approach that's been undertaken, although that we would normally expect to have our annual plan adopted by the 30th of June. There is very little risk, in fact, in having those delays. We will be looking to push out our rates notices on the back of the actual agreement around the annual plan. But we have been advising and working with the Office of the Auditor General around our changes in our timelines, and we'll just have to ensure that we've got those processes and timelines and working to those as that revision. But no, there's certainly no problem from the Auditor General.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no further questions, we will move into our agenda items. And I would invite Steve Gregory to present to us the first item, the Napier Conference Centre renaming.
Thank you. Through the Mayor, kia ora, councillors. So look, the purpose of this paper is to eliminate any confusion between the building name and the business activity operating inside the building. Historically, we have had the Napier War Memorial Centre and the Napier Conference Centre. And so having the two centres has caused much confusion. This paper is making it clear that the building is the Napier War Memorial Centre, and the business activity operating inside the War Memorial is the conferences and events business activity, with which we are proposing to change from the Napier Conference Centre to Napier Conferences and Events. The proposed new name draws attention to what the business actually delivers: conferences and events. It is important to point out that the business is not exclusive to just corporates. We have community rates, so the business and facility is open to the entire community for events, weddings, funerals, meetings, and anything you want to book the space for. We also operate a first in, first served policy and take no preference to anyone. So for example, if a community booking confirmed the date and time, and then a week later, a conference valued at $100,000 and 800 delegates strong wanted the same date, the community booking takes the preference. To emphasise again the differentiation and to make it clear, the building is the Napier War Memorial Centre, and the business activity operating inside the building is Napier Conferences and Events. We are not proposing changing the name of the building. We are seeking the approval of Recommendation A to name the change of the business activity operating inside the War Memorial Building. The business activity doesn't exclusively operate out of the Napier War Memorial Centre, but currently being based at this location, it manages conference and events across the city using multiple council venues, including the War Memorial, but also Century Theatre, Napier Municipal Theatre, Rodney Green Centennial Event Centre, and the East Coast Lab. Links to these venue websites will also be promoted on the Napier Conference and Events website. So now we're going to take you through some typical marketing collateral that really differentiates between the two and makes it clear to the community and customers of the business activity what is the venue and what is the business activity. So I'll just liaise with Cherie. If you could please bring up So we do have Rebecca Ainsworth here from marketing. So she has worked on this branding. So I'll go through, and if there's any technical stuff, we'll go through Rebecca. But look, so in a nutshell, we have stuck with our branding. Our branding imagery, logo, and stance of the market is well recognised and is strong. And as we've reported a number of times, it is growing. So we didn't want to go away from what is a successful brand. So in this first image, we have simply just taken out centre and put it in the proposed events. So Napier Conference and Events. So Sheree, if you could please go to the next page. I know this is probably a bit hard to see, but this is typical collateral that we share to PCO, so professional conference organisers or customers. But I suppose the important point here is, yes, we've got the logo, Napier Conference and Events, but if you note, and if you've got sharp eyes, down the bottom right, the venue is the Napier War Memorial Centre. If you go to the next slide too, please, Sheree. Again, this just amplifies that last point. Yes, we've got Napier Conference and Events collateral, but it is made very clear the venue is, down the bottom right on what you see in the brochure there, is Napier War Memorial Conference Centre, and we've just got Napier Conference and Events branding. Next slide, please, Sheree. That's just much the same. That's what the website will typically look like. Again, branding is staying the same, but we've just included the events in the name. I think the next few slides will give you more further perspective. So here, this is a typical invite or typical collateral that clients would use or could see. And what we're seeing is the venue is Napier War Memorial Centre and hosted by Napier Conference and Events. So it's really trying to work on that differentiation and making it very clear that the venue is the War Memorial and it's hosted, the event, the booking is hosted by the business activity. And we'll just move to the last. Again, we're making it very clear that when people are wanting to look for the venue or knowing where to go, it is the Napier War Memorial Centre and simply hosted by the business activity. So we are hoping, well, in the officers' minds, we think this is very clear and eliminating confusion that may have occurred previously this tactic. So that's my point to talking to the paper, and happy for any questions.
Thank you, Steve. Just a couple of questions from me. So the collateral you've shown us today is in relation to the Napier War Memorial Centre. I'm assuming that if it was another council venue that was being used, for example, the MTG, then it would be the same concept. You'd have the venue as the MTG hosted by Napier Conference.
Correct, yes.
Great. And with regards to the website, is the intention that that will include the other council venues that are available for conferences and events?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We'll include all other bookable venues into the website.
Right. And lastly, the logo that's associated with Napier Conferences and Events, that will be specific to the business activity itself, so it won't actually physically appear on any of the venues per se. It will be tagged specifically.
It'll be associated with marketing collateral of the business activity.
Yeah. Right. Thank you. So open up. Yes, Councillor Bogue.
Just following up from the Mayor's question about the logo, and I don't know if anybody can answer this, but I assume there will be a separate and unique logo for the War Memorial Centre. I don't know if anybody can answer that through you, Madam Mayor.
Yes, that it has been identified in the to go coincide with the War Memorial Reference Group with the architect design of the War Memorial. Yes, it certainly is. It's identified as a piece of work.
Thank you.
Hinamawana, I'm not sure which councillor in there has put their hand up, but
it's me, Councillor Crystal.
you may need to speak up just a little bit, Councillor Crystal.
Okay, is that better?
That's better, yep.
Thank you for that, Steve. This is a really good step in untangling the War Memorial Building from the organisation that organises conferences and functions. I've got a question. The brochures that you show in the appendix, at the moment they only show the War Memorial site as for the functions and conferences. Are there other brochures available for the other conference and function sites in our other facilities?
So look, all the other bookable spaces come under different business activities, but Napier Conference and Events can host and administrate any conferences or bookings that can go into those spaces. So those business activities would have their separate marketing collateral. So, you know, they're most definitely being promoted in the community and within their respective businesses already.
Okay, and so will they have the logo on it, the War Memorial, the conferences and events logo on their collateral?
Not necessarily, because those bookable spaces are associated with those business activities. So, for example, the Century Theatre is a MTG book, asset, and it's a bookable space. So that space is under all MTG collateral. But if there is an organisation that wants to book a conference or booking associated with the Napier conferences and events, we do that on behalf of the MTG.
Okay. So on the website that you have, you will list all the facilities. Will there be links to them and also the highridge rates and things like that?
Most definitely. I mean, with all of this marketing and collateral, it's all about that customer journey, and we want that every touch point for that customer journey to be easy, fluid. Because the moment you make every touch point of trying to purchase a product or service, we will lose our customers. So, look, we conduct this journey mapping and making it very easy across the business already. So most certainly.
Okay. And then just my last question. At the moment, obviously things are pretty quiet in the space. So have we put it out to the community to try and get them to use the space until we get more traction in the conference and events bubble that's going to happen in the future?
Yeah, so I can pleasingly report to you, that business is on the books under Napier conferences and events. What the pleasing news is we've only had very few absolute cancellations. Majority of our customers have either postponed further to later in the calendar year or early next year. So the good thing is we haven't lost significant business. They have just pushed their bookings out. And another good point to take is a lot of clients are just sitting on their bookings at the moment until we get further clarification on level 1 or what a possible refined level 2 is.
Mm-hmm.
So look, in the paper we did communicate a forecast for 2021. But look, we are wanting that to be incorrect because we had to make those forecasts at a point in time. And as bookings are slowly coming back, it is going to pick up.
That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Just before I move on to Deputy Mayor Brosnan, just to seek some further clarity around the logos, is there an opportunity for the use of dual logos when it's another venue, so that there's still that acknowledgement that the overarching brand of conferences and events sits within that that business activity, but then you've got the associated venue logo as well.
It does make it a little bit difficult and confusing, especially if the business activity uses non-council facilities to coordinate conferences and events, like it might book through PGA, which is not council. So it creates a bit of inflexibility and confusion with combining logos for different businesses, because the conferences and events business will be seen to be that sort of coordination activity, and should have the ability to book various venues being non-council and council. If that makes sense.
So we wouldn't normally, if we were coordinating an event that was going across a number of venues, expect our logo to be going on any of the collateral from a non-council related venue. I would have thought that was a great opportunity to further promote our brand.
Yeah, look, yes, if it's us that's administrating it, yes, there's that opportunity.
Yeah, and we would use other organisations' logos on the branding collateral for that event. That would make sense.
Yeah, I guess just trying to gain some clarity around the fact that we don't want that logo for Napier conferences and events to only be associated with the Napier War Memorial Centre. It needs to be associated with the whole business activity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Understand that.
Yeah. Thank you. Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Thank you, Your Worship. Steve, I just had a couple of questions as I kind of listened to you talk, if you wouldn't mind working them through with me. So my understanding is your staff will be employed by the Napier conferences and events, and they will run events across all of our bookable facilities and locations, but that team are currently based in the War Memorial Centre. Is that correct?
Correct. So
Thank you.
yeah, they will work with the business activities through the other bookable spaces.
Okay, and in all of our collateral, all of our internal marketing, all of our media releases, etc., it will be venue as War Memorial Centre and, if appropriate, hosted by Napier conferences and events.
Correct, yes, further to Madam Mayor's comment, yes.
Yeah, so there'll be no more double up of centre.
Correct.
Thank you. Will all the events across Napier's bookable venues be organised by Napier conferences and events? I think this seems to be the crux of the
not
question.
necessarily. If a client, for example, goes straight to the Municipal Theatre or goes straight to Century Theatre, they will book with that activity.
Yeah, so would it be fair to say anyone organising an event that crosses multiple locations will be organised by Napier conferences and events?
Yeah, on the money, yes.
Thank you. And so just bringing, I suppose, interested in your view, that there is, and I think the Mayor was touching on this earlier, that there is some business value to us in the marketing collateral that Napier conferences and events use, showcasing images of other facilities that it can also offer. Would that be fair to say that's something you're looking at?
Absolutely, that is the intention, to put all the bookable spaces onto the Napier Conference and Events website. Absolutely, it's added value, and it's promoting throughout our entire city.
Thank you. And my last question is one that I know I've asked you privately, but would be good to just confirm that the Napier War Memorial and the Napier Conference Centre and all of its variations over the years, to your knowledge and to our records, has never made a profit. Is that correct?
That is correct. We have looked back in much detail, and it is not made a net profit. But further to previous communications, we are tracking in a very good space. Prior COVID, we were tracking only requiring about 7% of ratepayer funds. We know our quiet time is that December, January, February period. The business has identified that and is working hard with the marketing and comms team on initiatives and tactics to grow this. And look, I can't stress enough that the business is in massive growth. And this is the disappointing thing is, from March, we were literally about to kick back off into our peak season, and we had some considerable business, and we were forecasting well above budget. So since reopening, we are averaging around 20-21% growth, and yeah, it was disappointing. So I think we do have the model right, and it is really just working on recovering costs and just bringing in more business. The brand is strong, and it's very well respected. We've got a fantastic team in there that know their industry exceptionally well, and we have got clients that are very impressed with our business and wanting to bring it to the business. And what further I can add is a lot of conferences that are predominantly only focused on the metro areas do now have a policy of wanting to go out to the provinces or to the regions, and we are starting to see those effects, which we need to leverage and be very front and centre of.
Thank you, Steve. I think that's probably answered my question. If you wouldn't mind, just through you, Your Worship, just a clarification on that. So when we talk about the business, we're talking about Napier Conferences and Events under its new branding, which covers multiple business facilities. But the War Memorial Centre has never made a profit, and as such is a not-for-profit. The business that you refer to is across all of our organisations. Points.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mawson.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. Steve, just a quick question. How many staff get employed over the business off the top of your head?
We have got the immediate Napier Conference and Events team, so that is quite strong. And then we have a resource team. So that is across the Napier Municipal Theatre and the Conference Centre. So that is 10 strong. And these guys are the guys that are working behind the scenes, making sure that there's no issues with technology and setup.
And of course, in the business, in the conferences and events business, you also have a contractor in there that's a local based contractor?
Yes, Dish Catering.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Councillor Bowe.
Thank you. With our fees and charges that we just set for the next year, and other documents, we've referred to the Napier Conference Centre fees and charges. Now, I appreciate some of the rooms within that conference centre may be renamed, but I assume that there will be a renaming done in terms of, instead of the Napier Conference Centre being listed in the fees and charges, it will be the War Memorial Centre, and things like our fees and charges and our annual report and things like that. This is assuming this resolution passes.
Yes, yes.
Great, thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Tapani.
Nice, easy question. I notice that often when we make these sorts of changes internally and these distinctions, I'm looking for confidence around the conventions and that will be spreading across the organisation to ensure we get a consistency of messaging across all of our divisions and departments. So we'll start seeing the same consistent use of technology, terminology across all our teams and across all our documentation.
Most definitely, you know, so this piece of work is making it very clear what the venue is and what the business activity is. So whether it's on a piece of market collateral, whether it's MTG or the War Memorial, that will be the venue hosted by the business activity.
Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Sorry, one more quick question. Steve, when should council expect to see the Napier War Memorial Centre management policy?
Yeah, very good question. So we have liaised with our heritage officer, Fleur, and she is happy to work on this. As you can imagine, she is very busy with the recovery, but she has indicated roughly 1 to 3 months. Draft, sorry, make that clear. A draft to come in 1 to 3 months.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Steve. You were clearly trying to really get some good clarity here around the differentiation. I would like to move the motion before us, and I would just like to foreshadow that I have a couple of additions to the officer's recommendation as follows. Point D, that a separate website be established for the Napier War Memorial Centre to tell the story of the centre and our fallen heroes. And this is to be incorporated into the War Memorial Design Working Group process. And E, that the rooms and halls in the Napier War Memorial Centre be renamed after battles and or fallen heroes of significance to Napier. And this is also incorporated into the War Memorial Design Working Group process. Do I have a seconder?
Yes,
Crystal.
me.
Crystal? Yeah. Councillor Crystal? Excellent, thank you. So as was very well articulated by Steve, the purpose of the paper before us today very much is to provide a clear differentiation between our War Memorial Centre and the business activity which occurs both within this venue and other council venues throughout the city. So this is another important step in recognising that the Napier War Memorial Centre is our city war memorial and a community centre available for all, as was stipulated by the Crown, to secure the original funding, and also to acknowledge the significant community funds that were contributed towards the build. So the resolution today also includes reference to the War Memorial Design Working Group, which includes several community representatives, and will be making a recommendation to council on the memorial elements reinstatement design later this calendar year. And I just want to advise that this group continues to work with the original architect, Guy Natouche, on the design concept. We also have the management policy for the centre, which is being developed, and the intention of this policy is to protect the site's heritage, recognising the commemorative elements, and importantly, the community use of the facility going forward into the future. And it's very pleasing to hear that we'll have a draft of that in front of us in the next few months. The additional points that I have added are again important, I believe, to clearly establish the War Memorial Centre as our city memorial, and the website, for example, to enable us to tell the story of our fallen heroes, the story of how the city was impacted by the various conflicts and wars, and the story of the War Memorial Centre itself. The business activity Napier Conferences and Events will also have its own website with links to all of the Napier City Council venues which are on offer under this umbrella, and provide an opportunity to really promote all the incredible facilities our city has to offer. Point E is again acknowledging that the rooms and halls within the War Memorial Centre form part of the story and enables us to recognise battles and fallen heroes of significance to Napier. Again, an opportunity that we can share and commemorate the stories of the past and acknowledge the building is our city war memorial. So I'm absolutely thrilled that we've taken this next step. It has been a long and sometimes challenging road to get to where we are today. However, it is very pleasing to be moving another step forward, and I look forward to the next steps with regards to the reinstatement of our war memorial elements and the other work that is being undertaken by the working group. So I'll now open up to others who would like to speak to the motion, and I see that Councillor Crown has her hand raised.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. Through you. I'm speaking in support of the amended motion today. The differentiation of the business activity and the war memorial is of great interest to our residents, and it's important that we move this forward in order to acknowledge the mana of the memorial. It also it highlights the range of facilities that we have available and allows our business activities to flourish, which it's fantastic to hear that it was on such a positive trajectory prior to COVID and that it is still well positioned. So important as we look to stimulate our local economy. I love the amendments that have been made also, once again, reinforcing the importance of the memorial as we acknowledge our history, our present and our future. So yeah, happy to support the motion today.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak to the motion before I pass across to Councillor Crystal for her right to speak? Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak in support of the motion and the amendments. I think it's really clear from this that the building is not a business, the site is not a business, but that Napier Conferences and Events is a business. And we're doing exactly what we said we would do. We said we'd take this, putting the name back on the building in 2 steps. So we'd put the name back on the building and then we'd address the business that operated within it, and that's exactly what we're doing. You know, the community has said to us the whole way along, we don't have an issue. You know, everyone wants to attract conferences and events and business to our town, and this is absolutely putting that in the right place. This is business as usual for the business unit, but is very clearly differentiating our memorial and putting it in its rightful place. I'm really excited about the management policy development and excited to see that come through to council. I think it sits in the right place with our heritage officer. So I'm happy to speak in support.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Brosnan. I don't know that I've heard the words excited and policy in the same sentence before. I agree. We have had 3 speak in support. Is there anyone that wishes to speak against the resolution? No? Okay, I invite Councillor Crystal for your opportunity to speak.
Thank you, I'm excited too. I'm speaking in support of the amended motion. This name change is a really positive step forward for our community. It separates the business that organises conferences and events within the War Memorial and other Napier Council facilities from the building and site that has been Napier's War Memorial since 1957. Holding conferences and events in Napier brings much needed revenue to our city and supports many of our businesses, and I totally support this. But we also need to remember the War Memorial was built by the people of Napier, and locals still remember the coin trails and fundraising efforts that the government matched dollar for dollar for this War Memorial to be built. As well as hosting conferences, we also need to make sure the people of Napier know it is available for their use at a reduced rate, and many don't realise this. It has been over 3 years since the heart and soul were ripped from the building, and so the next step in the journey is to restore the mana, the roll of honour, and the eternal flame that my grandfather lit. And once we see them burning, sorry, I get a bit emotional about this, burning brightly, only then we will be able to say we will remember them.
Thank you, Councillor Crystal. I will now put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Against? Carried unanimously. Thank you. And we move on to our second agenda item, the Park Island Northern Sports Hub, Taradale Bridge Club. And I would ask Deborah Stewart to come forward and speak to the paper.
Good morning, everyone. Just a brief background on the paper. We've been approached by the Taradale Bridge Club several months ago, and I think they presented to the public forum late last year and just outlined their proposal. The nub of the issue is they no longer have a home. They've got some money. They're keen to look at developing their own facility. They've reviewed many sites. They've been very comprehensive in their assessment of what the opportunities might be out there for them to get involved in. Where they've landed is to explore in detail the location at the Park Island Northern Sports Hub. So that's essentially where HBRU are now located. So in behind there was a site allocated for facilities associated. So that included Napier Pirates primarily, but also any other aligned clubs that might be able to work in with them. There's a lot of work to do to get them to that site. There's no design work being done. So servicing and all those bits and pieces that go alongside that have yet to be completed. But from an officer's perspective, we're comfortable that that is a good site for them. There's a couple of outstanding issues. Whilst we're fully supportive of the Taradale Bridge Club, we think that there needs to be some considerable work done to align with other groups that may also wish to be located in that spot. So that includes Napier Pirates and probably the Napier Bridge Club, who have more latterly come to us looking to improve their facilities. So they are currently located at Whitmore Park. Taradale Bridge Club has been using the facilities at Whitmore Park with the Napier Bridge Club in the interim, since they haven't had a home. Just in terms of understanding that, there are a number of bridge players who are members of both those clubs. So if you're a bridge person, you're a bridge person and you want to play as much bridge as you can, which means that you'll join as many bridge clubs as you can to get your cards on the table, so to speak. So, but we're really keen to facilitate a development on the Northern Sports Hub in conjunction with the Taradale Bridge Club and other users of those. So that's kind of where we've got to. The recommendation is basically that we support the Taradale Bridge Club as they move towards looking at the location, and that officers work with them. Just be aware there's no funding set aside for that project in the immediate future. There's some latterly. So those initial design solutions would be funded probably primarily by the Taradale Bridge Club, but we need to work through that in some detail.
Thank you. Thank you, Deborah. Do we have any questions? I see a number of hands up. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've just got a few questions. Obviously, there will need to be a resource consent process with this application. And would it be notified or unnotified?
The Plan Change 11 allows for this activity. There's likely to be some resource consent requirements around earthworks as opposed to the activity per se. So the Northern Sports Hub through Plan Change 11 is approved. It's consistent. This activity is consistent with that. So in terms of land use, I don't see there's likely to be a resource requirement. Depending on the scale of the activity, there may be some consent requirements around earthworks.
And through you, Madam Mayor, yeah, how long before the design work is completed on the Northern Hub, or could be completed?
That will be triggered by this. So if we get the recommendation approved as is suggested today, then we'll press on. We'll have some discussions with the Taradale Bridge Club, look at how We're going to progress that design work. It's quite a lot of work to be done, liaising with other clubs and stakeholders who may be interested in locating at that site. So it will take some time, and we've flagged that to the Taranaki Bridge Club that it won't happen immediately, but we'll work through it. So I can't give you a specific answer to that, Councillor Ross.
Okay, so because that was my next question, how long before they could put a spade in the ground? But realistically, is there anything we can do to speed up the process, and are there resourcing issues that we need to address as a council to make that happen?
It's a bit of how long is a piece of string, but we will work with them as quickly and as we can, but acknowledging that design work around that will take some time, as will the component of getting the other clubs on board. So if that's Napier Pirates, they're not quite ready to go yet, is my understanding, but they have been flagged on that site for some time. The same with the Napier Bridge Club. So they don't have a resolution from their club at this point fully supporting a move to Park Island in conjunction with the Taranaki Bridge Club, but they have flagged an interest in that. So that's kind of the first phase of the discussion, getting those other clubs on board. That will then determine what it's going to look like in terms of a built facility, and then we can crack on with the design work around that.
Thank you very much.
Through you, Madam Mayor, if I might add to that, we in our long-term plan, we don't have funding available for further development of the Park Island Northern redevelopment until 21-22, with some large monies available in 23-24, which would probably address servicing and potentially earthworks in that area. So before any design work might be embarked upon, there may need to be monies brought forward to enable that. So that's the timing and the priorities set on that through the last long-term plan process.
Just one further question, Madam Mayor, to John. So if we want to move funding forward, is there a formal process for that, or will you just come to us if that's an option?
That's a good question. There's a couple of options, I guess. The main one in front of us, or almost beside us, is the annual plan process, but I'd have to seek some advice on that. Perhaps, Adele, you might be able to comment on that.
No, or not.
Or not.
Sorry.
Off mute now.
Yeah, I'm off mute. So just in relation to that, obviously it depends on the funding and the ability to bring that forward and understanding what the impacts on the future ratepayer will be. A lot of the projects that were lined up in relation to this was memory loan funded, so we can work through that process anyway.
I have the annual plan in front of me now, and that monies is loan funded. And I guess just to reiterate what Deborah said, there's quite a bit of work to do, consulting and engaging with potential cohorts, I guess, in any development of a facility in that space before we know what that looks like and can do any detailed design for that. So perhaps a bit of thinking to be done outside of this meeting to really inform that question, Councillor Wright.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Sorry, mine was a hangover.
Oh.
Apologies.
No worries. Councillor Tuffany.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. My question's great report, so it's great to see this starting to get closer and closer to reality, and thank you, John, for providing us with those global dates. My questions are more around the nuances of what this might bring into effect. So when we consider making zone changes in the likes of around the estuary and Ahuriri, we have to be cognizant of things like reverse sensitivity, et cetera, So this sports hub, or this action station for the city, is looking at bringing together a variety of clubs, groups and sporting activity into one area so that we can get, I guess, a sense of vitality and activity in that space. the converse of that is, if this is a group of 50 plus people in their 60 plus years of age onwards, based on what I'm reading in the report, then are there any considerations around how, first of all, how wide is the opportunity being spread around our community so that others know of opportunities to be able to network their plans into this site? That might be able to come later. The other question I have is, how much risk or concern is there around conflicts of interests and activity which don't quite gel together in a sporting and active type space? So I know last year I received a number of complaints from people around Whitmore Park and the types of activities that were happening in and around Whitmore Park and the facilities there, and that the impacts on the residents was negative. So my concern is, as we look to start pushing all of these groups, or not pushing, but creating an opportunity for all of these groups to operate in one space, how much thought have we put into those conflicting interests, those different age groups, those incompatibility issues?
Through you, Madam Mayor, there are always issues for us, and we are always juggling younger people with older people, with sports people, with passive recreation, with neighbours, and all those bits and pieces that go with us. We have been, to answer the first part of your question, we often get approached by people looking for homes on reserves, and my stance is generally we need to work together as opposed to putting people in individual locations. Now, the reason for that is that there's a whole lot of operating and renewal costs associated with running a facility. And if those can be shared by a bigger organisation, then you get a much better result and much better financial security, more activity on a site, and so on and so forth. So we're always trying to encourage clubs and organisations to work together. Clubs have traditionally preferred to work on their own because the sharing thing seems to not work so well for everybody. But that's just a matter of working through some of those operational issues. In terms of the reverse sensitivity issues, those have been dealt with through Plan Change 11, which was pretty carefully thought out and a lot of consultation undertaken in relation to that, including setback of buildings, making sure car parks weren't right next to residential areas, looking at light spill and those bits and pieces that go with that. So they have been considered through that Plan Change 11, and this particular site has been approved through that process. Notwithstanding, we will always have issues, as we are at the rugby union, where people are behaving badly. It seems to be the nature of the reserves game. There seems to be a bit of bad behaviour attracted to reserve car parks in particular. But we look to deal with those as and when they arrive and do as much as we can through the early design process to mitigate the effects.
Fantastic.
Through you, Madam Mayor, if I could just add there, that wasn't a comment saying that the rugby union were exhibiting bad behaviour. It's other people using their car park, just for clarification there. However, from previous experience, we do have to be careful about how we might co-locate different activities in the same building. Obviously, there's economies of scale for being able to do that in a multi-sport or multi-use facility, particularly building one roof as opposed to multiple in an area is a key consideration there. So as Deborah's pointed out, there's a lot of conversation and engagement to go on possible co-location as we move forward. So I think that's a really good point that you've made, Councillor Tapani.
Thank you very much, guys. No further questions from me, Your Worship. That was a very comprehensive answer. Much appreciated. Good detail. Thank you, team.
Thank you, Councillor Tuffney. We have a question in Hinamoana. Sorry, is the name right?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Firstly, thank you, John, for clarifying the rugby situation. It was rather harsh, I thought. We've gone around and about co-location. Are the Bridge Club happy to be in a building with a fantastic rugby club?
Sorry, through you, Madam Chair, they're absolutely have been very receptive with a degree of apprehension, which is probably right. So they're keen to work through the issues. You know, Napier Pirates, they're different kind of, as Councillor Tapani has explained, they're kind of different activities, but have a lot of potential to co-locate if worked through and we think about it.
Thank you very much. We've got Richard, Councillor McGrath over here.
Yeah. Just along the lines of co-location, I think the first Park Island Master Plan came out around about 2011 and Pirates were involved then. It's now 2020 and we're still talking. Now the Bridge Club have come to us fairly cashed up and kind of ready to go. I mean, they need some kind of assurance and timing to get things off the ground. I mean, they can't wait another 9 years for council or clubs or for everyone to be talking. We need to speed the process up a little bit, I think. I'm not sure how we do that, but I don't think they can wait another 9 years.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I think you're absolutely right. My hope is that if we got, even if Pirates weren't ready to move, if considerations for the development of their hopeful movement to that site were put in at this stage, it may be that this could be a staged development. So it's really about considering what their requirements are at this design phase and then working through that to see whether we can stage this to enable the Bridge Club to get moving.
To add to that through you, Madam Mayor, happy to be able to kick any doubts around the rugby union behaviour to touch with regard to previous comments. I guess, you know, our long-term plan sets a priority for our investment of funding and resource in the development of projects. And the long-term plan identified available funding for different components of the Park Island, central, northern, southern developments. And that sets the priority for our work programs and when we invest. Both people time and obviously funding into the development of these initiatives. So absolutely, that sort of work can be brought forward. I guess we have a pretty full program, so that might mean that other work needs to be reprioritised in order to do so. But that is at the convenience of council to do that. So we just need to be given the right direction and the right funding at the right time.
Thank you, John. Councillor Crystal. As Councillor McGrath said, the Bridge Club, obviously, they've come to us and they've got $500,000. So how would the funding for the building go with the mixed model of use? Does everyone have to put in the same amount? How would that work if these people have already got and, you know, raised this money?
Through you, Madam Mayor, that's one of the most complex issues on the table, to be honest. Some clubs come to us and they're asset rich and cash poor. Some people come to us as the Bridge Club are and they're cash rich, but they don't have an asset. And the operating costs and the renewal costs around that need to be worked through for the shared component of any new facility. So some parts are likely to be largely exclusive use, and then there'll be some shared components around car parks, servicing, shared ablution facilities and those kind of things. So I can't give you an exact answer on that, but it is a super critical part of how these things work and really important in terms of the ongoing success, because without financial success, they struggle.
Thank you. Councillor Vogue.
I just want to foreshadow that when we do come to the recommendation, that I'm going to add another proviso. There's A, B, and B is to urge the Taradale Club and the Napier Bridge Club to work together in order to think about how they could possibly share a facility. I mean, I'll speak to that when the motion arises, but just to foreshadow it.
Thank you, Councillor Vogue. Are there any further questions? Councillor Brown?
I'm just getting a little bit confused around what council's role is in this. If they want to work together, shouldn't we get out of the way and let them do it? Or is it important that we're in there and facilitating?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I think it's really important that we're in there facilitating. It's very hard to, in my experience, get clubs and organisations to work together. Our role is that we are landowner there, so we are pretty keen in making sure we achieve our strategic objectives in terms of the Park Island Master Plan. And I think we've got quite a lot to offer in terms of facilitating the groups that may have an interest in there. So I understand your point, we can be a stifler, but I think in this particular situation we could add a lot to the discussions, both through our technical expertise and through our knowing who's out there looking for what.
Thank you.
Now, Councillor Wright, I think your hand's still up from earlier.
Yeah, sorry.
Right. Thank you. And Councillor Tapani.
Thank you, Your Worship. In favour of the paper so far. My question is around confidence again. So based on the last series of questions and the indications from staff, I'm confident that you're covering all of our bases in the interests of the city. But in the long term, is there still the scope and ability for us as a city to be able to reconfigure those spaces in time? So if I come into the sports complex or sports area with $500,000 for my group and association, I invest that into a building in a fixed location, and then 20 years down the track, significant change in Napier to Columbia, whatever it is, we have to reconfigure that space. What ability does Napier City have to continue to drive the necessary change? My concern and confidence that I'm looking for is, while I want to provision and support the provisioning of spaces and places for our community, I want to ensure that we still have the flexibility and space to be able to adapt and change for the needs of the future. So could you give me some confidence around that?
Through you, Madam Mayor, that is a tricky one, but we have those kind of things happening all the time, and the Napier and the Taradale Bridge Clubs are a really good example of that, but things have changed for them. The Napier Bridge Club own their building on Whitmore Park, and have a lease for the land for us, and so they are now looking to say, actually, this is no longer as fit for purpose as it used to be, and the changes in the club and the changes in bridge and the changes in the location of our membership means that we are now looking to possibly relocate or rehome. So the work-ons for council in terms of ensuring we are flexible enough to look at those options long term is that we are ultimately the landowner in this situation. These clubs have leases with us for various times, and that's not to say that we would pull pin or say, oh, we don't want you in there anymore. It's about saying we're all in this together, and we would always encourage looking at new ways of working further down the track, because things do change.
Fantastic. Thank you. That was awesome.
Excellent. If there's no further questions, Councillor Bogut, you have indicated you'd like to foreshadow an amendment. Would you like to move the motion and then provide that wording for the administration?
Sure. Okay. So I'll move recommendation A and B, which I will read. Okay. That looks about right. To urge the Taradale Bridge Club and Napier Bridge Club to work together in order to consider. Yep. So just speaking to the overall motion, I think it's given the green light to Taradale, saying thank you for coming and discussing this with us. And yes, although we haven't got any resources at this stage allocated for this particular building, thank you for coming to us, and we will definitely look at it. Why I've added B is that both bridge clubs are looking for new premises, and Taradale was the one that came to us, and they have been meeting at Whitmore Park with the Napier Club. The Napier Club says quite clearly in the letter that's attached to the agenda that they're keen to join with Taradale, And I felt that if we were just to acknowledge and invite the Taradale Club alone to Park Island, and there's no suggestion that they might consider sharing it with the Napier Club, it might not seem fair and it could create a bit of a precedent. So I just think it makes sense for us to recommend. We can't force clubs to amalgamate or to share premises. That's not what it's about, but it's just a recommendation that they consider sharing this community. It is public land. We don't have unlimited amounts of public land. They might be able to find their own way of working together, but I think it is appropriate for us just to urge them to look at joint use rather than okaying just one bridge club. So that's why I urge you to vote for A and B.
Thank you, Councillor Bogue. Do we have someone who'd like to second that? Councillor Taylor, thank you very much. Did you wish to speak to that now?
Yes, Your Worship, I'd like to speak to it now. I took particular interest in a lot of the questions that were asked by various councillors, and I think the actual resolution or motion in front of us talks about, you know, we're only at the beginning of a pathway and there's a lot of work to be done. And we all realise, and I think everybody's aware, that sport and recreation post-COVID-19 is going to be quite different. This gives us an excellent opportunity to actually assist organisations in our community to work a way forward, work collaboratively together. And we had a wonderful presentation from the Taradale Bridge Club, which has initiated this whole situation. I think we will recall that both Taradale and the Napier Bridge Club actually meet on different days, and as Deborah has mentioned, bridge players, they'll join many clubs so that they can play almost every day of the week. So I can see that the urging of them to work together is not a major issue, and I think that if we can get other sporting organisations to work together as well, then we've got a positive way forward. I think the other thing, by the council supporting this, it will give the clubs the opportunity to seek other funding from external organisations to assist them, showing that we are at least positively accepting it. So I think it's a positive move. It's a very good move for us. The club should be congratulated, and I'm happy to support the motion, the amended motion.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Wright.
Yes, I support the amended motion, but would like to suggest that we also add a C, which is that officers bring to council some options and costings to bring funding forward to progress this project. There seems to be a feeling around the councillors, from what I've been hearing, is that we would like to progress this as fast as possible, given that we have a willing club with plenty of capital and who wants to get this moving. So that would be what I would be suggesting at this point.
As a mover of the motion, Councillor Bogue, are you happy to add point C?
Yes, that's fine, but could I just see it up, please?
So I'll read it slowly again.
Thank you.
If you like. That officers bring to council options and costings to bring funding forward to progress this project.
And are you happy to second that? Yep, thank you, Councillor Taylor.
Yep, I do. I just would say, though, that we probably will be looking at the long-term plan, I would think, because we're going to need a lot more than 500,000 to make this happen. So I think it's good adding that suggestion, that recommendation. But I think we have to be realistic that it's not going to happen overnight, but hopefully this will put it a bit higher up the list.
We have had 3 speak in favour of the motion. Was there anyone wishing to speak against?
Sorry?
Is there anyone wishing to speak against the motion?
being the case.
Yes, sorry, my apologies, my hand was up, Madam Mayor. It's Councillor Crown. Oh, look, I'm really supportive of the Bridge Club, and I think it's fantastic that they've come to us in such a strong financial position. But I am concerned about the amendment, point B. I've got no problem with A and C. We're in a perceived position of power in regards to being the landowner here, and just from a democratic perspective, I think for our officers to work alongside them, the two clubs, and urge at that level would be fine, based on the information, the feeling that they get from the clubs. But I don't find it appropriate for us to put that in a council recommendation. So yeah, that's why I'm speaking against the amended motion before us.
I'll speak against it.
And Councillor McGrath also has something to add here.
Yeah, I'm speaking against the motion. I absolutely support A and C, but I don't think it's a council's position to suggest clubs merge. I'd prefer to see two strong clubs. We're already working with the Bridge Club to do with other sporting codes. The Bridge Club have suggested that they had a couple of other groups that were interested in working with them. I just don't think it's our role to suggest just one club that they work with. So I won't be supporting the motion.
Yeah, okay. A couple of things, Councillor McGrath. I don't think there's a suggestion that the two clubs should merge. I think the point B is around encouraging them to work together. Would it perhaps be suitable to amend the point B slightly, just to say that we facilitate a conversation with the Taradale Bridge Club to work together with the Napier Bridge Club and other interested clubs, and then whatever the rest of that point was.
My concern with that is I agree we should be working with other interested clubs, but I don't think we should be specifying another bridge club. If you have a look at some of the other clubs we have in Napier, whether it be Old Boys Marist or Taradale, they don't have two rugby clubs working out of the one place. They'll have rugby, soccer, netball, hockey, cricket and softball, but I don't think we should be specifying that one other organisation being the Napier Bridge Club.
Could I speak to that right of reply? The reason why I mentioned the Napier Bridge Club was that they have a letter. They did send us a letter, saying that they're interested also in the facility. There is no mention at all in the officer's recommendation of anything other than the Taradale Bridge Club. And I felt it was appropriate for us to, certainly not to force anybody to merge, but just leave the door open for the two bridge clubs to have a conversation to consider. This is a public facility. And I think if we just say that, okay, Taradale Bridge Club, off you go, and the officers are going to bring council costings and all this sort of thing, it's setting a precedent, and it suggests that there's just one club that we are considering. And I think we need to leave the door open. And those were the two clubs that were mentioned in our papers, and only one of them was in the recommendations. So I'm going to speak in favour of the motion as it now stands, A, B and C. Because if we don't have a B in it, then we're telling the officers to bring the council options and costings forward to progress this project, which is the Taradale Bridge Club. And I think we need to look a bit wider than that. Just trying to be more inclusive without forcing a merger, which you can't do anyway.
Councillor Bogue, would you be happy for point B to be amended so that it didn't specifically name the Napier Bridge Club and that it did just reference other interested clubs?
Yep, that would be all right. Yep.
Better.
But where would that leave number C? It's still the Taradale Bridge Club will be the ones that the officers are talking to, I assume.
That is correct. Yeah, because they're the ones that did approach us. They're the ones that have indicated they have the funds available. So that will be who the key relationship will be with at this point.
Okay. Yep.
I'm quite happy with that because that also includes the opportunity to work with the Pirates Rugby Club.
Councillor Price, I saw you had your hand raised.
Yeah, in actual fact, you took the words out of my mouth, Madam Mayor, but I like it being left open because, you know, Deborah said earlier on that we're approached by clubs all the time answering Councillor Tapani's question, and this leaves it open to all clubs to be able to work with Taradale Bridge Club, who are obviously the pivot of it all because they've come to us for the future. Thank you.
Councillor Wright.
Yeah, no, I'm happy with that. At the moment, I think that's a much better reflection of our discussion.
Excellent. Councillor Brown.
Just to throw, hopefully not throw a spinner in the works, could I propose a different wording for B? So my suggestion is that council officers undertake a facilitation role to bring other community organisations to co-locate together to support ongoing financial security of the facility long-term where possible. I think it's the urge word that I'm concerned around. Maybe it's facilitate conversations.
What about recommend? What about
do we want to recommend that, or do we want to be a facilitator if they want to? Because it's their decision, not ours. It's my position.
Councillor Lowe.
It was a very long, I'd have to see it up there actually, I can't keep it all in my
I
head.
think it's probably an easier way. I think essentially what Councillor Brown has said is what's there, and the primary concern is around the word urge. So if we would change urge to facilitate a conversation or something that
between the Taradale Bridge Club and other interested clubs. Okay. Does that suit you, Councillor Brown?
Yeah, and I think it was around what the purpose of that is, and I don't know if that helps in the resolution, but like the goal of that conversation is to support the ongoing financial security of the facility long term. So I don't know if that helps or not to include that. Happy to leave that to the rest of you.
I don't think we need to carry on going into any additional detail. I think that conversation is something that we would facilitate, and those finer details would come out of that. Yeah. And this will come back.
Yeah, sorry, thinking on my feet, and yeah, I think you're right.
Good conversation. Thank you, Councillor Brown.
Through you, Madam Mayor, did Councillor Taylor, was he okay with that word change as the seconder? Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, someone just asked for confirmation of the wording for C. It was that officers bring to council options and costings to bring funding forward to progress the project.
Thank you for clarifying that, Councillor Wright.
Yeah.
I'll give everybody a moment just to read where we have landed with that, and then I will put the motion.
I'm okay with it.
Thank you, Councillor Vogue. And Councillor Taylor has indicated that he's happy with it as seconder.
And thanks for the input from everybody. Good conversation.
Great collaborative effort. All had an opportunity to read. I will now put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand.
Aye.
Can you see us?
Against? Confirming there's no longer anybody against. Excellent. So passed unanimously. Thank you. And on to our next agenda item, which is the water conservation Parks, reserves and sports grounds water conservation strategy, which again we had Deborah.
Sorry, Tim, you'll be very sick of me by the end of today, but hopefully you get it all out of your system. Just to go back through you, Madam Mayor, we have done a bit of planning over the last few months, and one of the projects we've been working on is the water conservation strategy, which has been triggered as a result of our consent to take water from the city, and looking at how we might improve efficiencies within what we do in the Parks and Sports Ground network. So this report is a largely operational document with a number of recommendations about how we might review our current water consumption for the various activities we take, and then looking to some actions to reduce our water take. So it's one about information finding as a first past the post kind of a process, and then looking at how we might implement some of those make some recommendations as a result of those findings to reduce and improve our efficiency of water take. So across the city, we use a lot of water, and I get a lot of grief. But as you well know, our city looks magnificent most of the time, and we produce some exceptional sports grounds, which we should and are very proud of. But there are a lot of opportunities where we could improve things just by simple things such as fixing water leaks, looking at more efficient means of irrigation. So basically that's what the report does. It takes some case study, looks at some detail, makes a series of recommendations for us to work on. Some of those of which we have already implemented. Centennial Pond was one of our biggest consumers, and the Three Waters team gave me an inordinate amount of grief about that. We have now largely remedied that, just some fines to work on there, but that was one of the things that's been bubbling away for a long time, or leaking away for a long time, should I say. And yeah, so this report is basically a document for us to work on to improve our efficiency of water use throughout the city.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions? Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Thank you. Deborah, the report isn't attached to the minutes, or the agenda, sorry, and wasn't under the separate cover. And being that we are now postponed until May 21, I was going to suggest we leave this on the table until we could see the report. Your thoughts on that?
My thoughts were that it should have been attached to the agenda. So, so if you haven't seen it, I think it's very ambitious to ask you to support it.
Yeah, thank you. I'm particularly interested. I know working through the Anderson Park development process with Councillor Taylor a term or so back, there was a recirculation plan, for instance, for the water as part of that development, which I understand didn't make it into the final cut. And so I'm particularly interested to see what sort of retrofits and things we may be looking at for water conservation. I know a similar thing happened along Marine Parade. So yeah, I would very much like to see the report before we approve it.
For you, Madam Mayor, that's a completely reasonable request, and I apologise that it's not there. I thought it was.
Not a problem.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Brosnan. So we will leave that to lie on the table and move on to our next agenda item, being the rates postponement policy review. And Gary, you will be, or either Gary or Adele.
No, it's Gary here. Good morning, Worship and councillors. All right. So the rates postponement policy is a vehicle that allows council to delay the receipt of rates in certain circumstances. So with the current pandemic, we've identified the need for council to be able to provide broad-based relief in times of significant extraordinary circumstances. So at present, each application needs to be presented to councillors for discussion. If more than just a handful of applications are made, then council would quickly be overwhelmed. So the proposed amendment allows councillors to identify and put a framework around significant extraordinary circumstances that council officers can then apply in processing mass applications. So through a resolution, factors that would be included would be what the circumstances are. So, you know, flood, earthquake, pandemic. how it's expected to impact the community, the types and location of properties impacted, time frame for postponement, and through subsequent resolutions, those factors could be renewed or amended as required. So within the policy, we've also just looked at a few other minor amendments, such as some clarification, cleaning up of language, just to make it a bit clearer for everybody to read. A more detailed definition of financial hardship in postponement for the elderly. The removal of the 5-year write-off on postponements for farmland. And delegations being extended to the Chief Financial Officer and the Investment and Funding Manager for farmland and elderly postponements. Also, authorised agents can apply for postponement for special circumstances in addition to the ratepayer. So as I was saying, overall, the changes are designed to improve the council responsiveness and provide greater clarity for users of the policy. So, are there any questions?
So,
I did have a conversation with the officer previously about the use of the word elderly to describe people 65 years and older. You know, it's got implications of people who are very frail and fragile and, you know, just on their last legs. But I think it's very hard to find another synonym for that because it refers to people 65 years and older. And so I just wanted to say it makes the policy sound a bit fuddy-duddy, but I guess that's the definition we've got and probably that we're stuck with unless somebody can think of a better word.
Antoinette has suggested older persons.
That sounds good. Sounds good.
through you, Madam Mayor, generally when we're dealing with community, we refer to older persons, people over 65. The elderly is generally for people 85 years and older.
And
Yes.
older persons is used in the health sector for over 65.
Older persons. Yeah.
Perfect. If we could have an action just to amend the policy to include the words older persons as opposed to elderly. Excellent.
The definition is there in terms of being a superannuitant, somebody who's old enough to receive government superannuation. So it's just a matter of changing that word that's been defined. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Deborah, for noting the action. Do we have any other questions of Gary? No, then I would, Councillor Mawson.
Yeah, hi Gary. Sorry, it's just in relation to why is it specifically that they must have owned the property for 5 years?
Okay.
Yeah.
That's partly just to limit the potential applications and also to ensure that we have a clear cutoff timeframe for people that have owned the property for a reasonable amount of time. So there may be a perception within the community. Sorry, through you, Madam Mayor. There may be a perception through the community that people are trying to take advantage or they have an unfair advantage over others that have been long-standing ratepayers within the community. So it's trying to provide a little bit of equality, those things. That's a good question.
Okay.
Just to continue on from that, 5 years seems quite excessive in terms of if the concern is that people who have recently, purchased a property or are motivated to buy a property with one of their goals to be a rates postponement. So I guess opening up the question around whether that time frame could be reduced to perhaps 2 years.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That was kind of where I was heading with that. I just felt that 5 years was quite long.
That through you, Madam Mayor, that also doesn't take into account people who've been ratepayers in Taradale and they've moved to another suburb, does it? So they've been Napier ratepayers potentially for 30 years, but they've just moved house.
Yeah, I guess I'm a little bit sceptical that there would be anybody intending to take advantage of the policy in terms of it being related to a property purchase. So I guess the proposal I would put on the table is whether there needs to be a time frame in there at all. Would there be any concerns, Gary, with regards to making that amendment?
Not at all, Your Worship.
Adele.
Yeah, just through the Mayor. I mean, we were happy to obviously take on board the feedback from the councillors today. As Gary mentioned, it was about creating a framework which would then give officers the ability to make decisions on behalf of council, with that clarity. You could have, alternately, you could reduce the time frame, or the other option, if you want to have the ability to make that decision from day one, you might want the opportunity yourselves to make that decision rather than leaving that with council officers. That would be your other option as well.
I would be perfectly comfortable to take out the time frame completely and leave that in the hands of officers to make the decisions. Is anybody in opposition to that around the council table?
My question kind of leads on to that, if you'll allow, Your Worship.
Yes.
I was looking for the word occupy in the policy, because I think regardless of how long they've been in the property, I think, and Gary, I may be missing it somewhere in there, but a requirement for you to seek a rates for emission on the property you occupy would be more important than, say, a time frame that you'd been occupying it, and which would, of course, restrict people receiving this for a range of, say, rental properties they might own, which some people in that age category would. So just you're interested in your feedback on that as a potential other way of guarding against misuse of the policy.
Through you, Madam Mayor. That's a really good suggestion, and it is something we have looked at. So I'd be very open to councillors discussing and potentially including that as a provision within the policy.
Councillor Tapane.
Follow-on question. Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, from the Deputy Mayor's question. Gary, so if the team considered those options, what was the rationale for picking the time frame versus that more open aspect around occupy? What was the rationale there, please?
Through you, Madam Mayor. So the 5-year time frame was really just a relative measure. There's no exact measure for it, and just sort of looking at what some other policies around the country have included. We're looking at trying to include something that was relative. So in terms of occupied, it is also something we did consider, but we thought that if we removed the requirement for occupation, then especially where you've got a number of property owners that might be adversely impacted and quite significantly impacted, it might remove them from the equation. So we're just trying to balance up the two. I think the reality is that anytime you put a condition on a policy like this, somebody is always going to be unduly impacted or unintentionally impacted. So we're just trying to find that balance. So I would be open to, certainly be open to having an occupier as a requirement, but be aware that if that does occur, then there would be a lot of property owners out there that may rent out quite a large range of properties that would be impacted by being necessarily excluded.
And so just a further comment there through the Mayor. We have done a review about a year or so ago around the number of ratepayers that were non-resident in Hawke's Bay, so therefore the rates notices were going out of Hawke's Bay, and it was around 20 to 30%. So there is a large number of unoccupied, places, and is what Gary referred to as we do have them tenanted out. So it would be, for those people, they might be heavily impacted as well because of COVID.
Councillor Brosnan, did you wish to comment on that any further? Are you proposing that we do make the addition of that it has to be an owner-occupied property?
Yeah, I think that would be prudent. I think we don't want to open ourselves up to people in that age bracket or meeting some of the other circumstances, applying it to a range of, say, rental properties, and we have no guarantee that that would be passed on to tenants. And so I think, yeah, I think that would be a better way of doing it than putting in the time frame.
Councillor Brown?
Just a query as to how that would work for properties that they own that they don't occupy but aren't necessarily tenanted out, so holiday houses, for example. Or if there's another financial downturn and they lose all their tenants, will we look for financial relief in that setting?
Yeah, through the Mayor, I agree with Councillor Brown's comments there. We will have a risk there if they don't have any tenants and they don't have the ability to pay, so that's just something to consider.
Any comments or thoughts to add from other councillors? Councillor Lowe?
Apologies. I just want to go back to the elderly without flogging an elderly horse or anything. But I appreciate it's just a protocol. But instead of elderly, the older person, it doesn't fit so well with the wording. And I'm wondering if we could use the word senior, postponement for the seniors, because if you replace on page 27 the word elderly with the older person, it doesn't fit very comfortably grammatically, and so instead of the elder person ratepayers are those who are old enough to qualify to receive New Zealand superannuation, if we could say senior ratepayers and we make our definition just with that word, so it would fit, I think, a little more comfortably than the older person, though I did appreciate the officer presenting that option.
I think that the older person is a recognised convention, and I'm sure that the officers can do a bit of wordsmithing to make sure that it reads grammatically correct. If you're happy just to leave that with them, Councillor Bowe.
Whatever, yeah, I'm just looking at one word rather than fiddling around and rearranging the sentence in order to put the older person, but whatever works, I'm okay.
So, thank you. Okay, so I'd like to return to the conversation about occupied and if any other councillors had some comments. Councillor Tapane.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this is, I might need to take some direction and clarity from staff on this one. So as I understand it, in the conversation so far, I have a preference for an owner-occupier type statement, acknowledging Councillor Brown's concerns around holiday homes and those who may own an asset within our boundaries but don't live in that asset. As I understand it, based on this conversation today, if I was that property owner and I was in a period of financial hardship and I was approaching Napier City Council for a rates postponement on an asset that I don't live in, that sits somewhere else, that is currently empty, that I occasionally use in the summer, I would suggest that perhaps I've got a bit of financial question to be able to address that rates if we're talking about a secondary asset that's actually a holiday home. And so I would prefer to keep the owner-occupier focus, but enable staff provision and flexibility to be able to make some assessments in that space to see and be able to assess the genuine need around rates postponement. That's my thinking at this stage, and I could be a little bit out of whack, I'm not sure, but I would prefer to see an owner-occupier type focus.
Councillor Simpson.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. I think we're overlooking a couple of mechanisms that are used for family homes. One is a family trust that owns the home but is occupied by the family, or in other cases where younger family members have the incomes that can sustain a second home that perhaps their parents live in. So I think we have to be very careful about how we classify owner-occupied and how we classify tenanting, because it could be a primary family home, which is owned by someone that doesn't live in it, but is used by other family members. So I think we have to be very careful about how we classify and stylize the ownership and the occupation of a home. And I think we just have to be careful about having preoccupied views about how home ownership applies to use.
Very good points, Councillor Simpson. Hene Moana, someone, and Councillor McGrath?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just sort of along the lines of Uppy and Nigel here, it's about the community supporting the community a little bit here. And an out-of-town speculator who's renting homes in Napier is not someone who's volunteering in the community. They're not coaching a team. They're not shopping local, and now they're asking for support. That doesn't sit very well with me. I think, you know, it's about locals supporting the locals here, and somewhere just lining that up in the middle. I'm not sure how we do it, but you know, if you've got homes all around New Zealand and you're struggling and you're not living in our town, you're going to have to make some sort of business decision rather than a home ownership decision. So I'd like to see something in there that does sort of specify that you're a member of Napier and you're active in Napier and you're part of Napier. So I think we need some wording in there somewhere. How the wordsmiths do it, that's up to them.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. I just acknowledge that Councillor Mawson and Councillor Wright have their hands raised. I was just going to seek some guidance from you, Adele. Do we need to actually adopt this policy today, or do we have an opportunity in terms of our timeframes to bring this back to our next council meeting, which I believe we have one next week, to enable us to take this conversation offline, because I'm sensing that there is potentially some pretty significant changes to pull through.
Through the Mayor, yes, I agree that it's probably worthwhile doing a bit more work around this based on the conversations today, which has been great, particularly around the owner-occupier space. And we can certainly look to bring that back to the next available meeting. There is some requests coming through for rates postponement, so there is a requirement for us to look at this as soon as possible, but we're happy to take this offline and progress this a bit further before bringing it back to council.
Excellent. So, Gary, yes?
Yes, Madam Mayor, sorry. Something I did want to raise as well is just around the issue of it's never going to be quite a clean clause within the policy. There are always going to be people that are impacted by it. So one of the things I think that it really does intend is there needs to be a bit of a sensibility overlay when council officers are processing applications of sort of a level of fairness or a degree of fairness. So one of the things that was raised is you might have, say, an out-of-town property owner, but they might have, say, several residential properties within Napier. So say, for instance, they are in a situation where although they're not in the area, they've got the ratepayers that live with, renters that live within those properties, but because of their situation, they're forced to sell those properties. That means that those ratepayers are potentially put out in the street through that forced property sale. And so these are some of the things that we do need to consider of those unintended consequences by trying to clean it up. So it's definitely worth more debate, but we do need to consider these factors with the applications. And so similar to having somebody that might own the house and say that their parents live within it or something to that effect, we do need to consider some of these on a case-by-case basis, but have the flexibility to be able to do that.
Thank you for providing that clarification, Gary.
Volume, Your Worship. We can barely hear you.
Yeah, we've got something outside. I won't try and guess what type of tool, but it's very loud. Sorry. So is everyone happy if we just lay this on the table and we can provide further feedback to Gary with a view to this coming back to our next council meeting? good. Thank
Yes.
you. So our next agenda item is the rates remission policy review.
Okay.
And Gary, I'm here. If you could talk us through this one, please, and whether there's any potential similar issues within this one that may need.
Yes, thanks, Your Worship. There may be some issues within it, because essentially we're trying to address the same situation as we did with the postponement policy of identifying those significant extraordinary circumstances. So the difference between the two policies, by the way, is that the remission policy is a vehicle for council to provide discounts on rates or penalties related to rates in limited circumstances. And so also, as with the postponement policy, the pandemic's identified the need for council to be able to provide that broad-based relief in times of significant extraordinary circumstances. So council's currently unable to do that, except looking at each individual application. And so council would quickly become overwhelmed if there was more than just a handful presented. So the resolutions, it would be the factors within the resolutions we'll be looking at would be similar to those postponements. And so without going through it in too great a detail then, might I suggest then, based on the views with the postponement policy, that we postpone this one and to have had a chance to review it then and bring it back to the table for the next meeting.
Sounds like the best course of action. So we will lay this one on the table as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much, Gary. And you're up again for agenda item 6, which is the investment policy review.
That's right. Should be getting sick of me soon. This one's a little less contentious than the last two. So the investment policy details how the council can invest. A review of the policy needs to occur at least once every 3 years. Normally the review would coincide with a long-term plan. So this review arises as the council is considering membership in the local government funding agency. And the purpose of the review is to confirm that the council has capacity within its investment policy to hold financial instruments issued by the LGFA. So namely, there'd be shares, borrower notes, if the council does become a borrower. If the council were to become an investor at some point, then we would also need to subscribe for uncalled capital. So looking through the policy, provision has already been made for LGFA investments in earlier amendments, and so no further amendments required at this time. So are there any questions?
No questions. I will just comment that we are approaching close to 2 hours, but we do only have a couple of agenda items left. So if everybody's happy, we won't take a break. We'll just push through.
Yep.
Yep, all happy with that? Excellent. And if anyone is really struggling to hear me, I'm happy to pass the chairing over to the deputy to make it easier, if that would be preferable.
You're much clearer now.
You
went really quiet for a while. You're much clearer.
Thank you. You're off the hook, Annie. So there's no questions on the paper, then I would ask someone to move the motion, please. Thank you, Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Mawson. Did you wish to speak to that, Councillor Wright? You're on mute. Okay.
Sorry, yeah, no, I'm happy with that, and I think it's just makes sense. So yeah.
Great, thank you. Councillor Mawson, did you wish to comment at all?
No, that's fine, Your Worship. Thank you.
Any other councillors wish to speak to the motion? Very good. So I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Against? Carried unanimously. And Gary is back again for the liability management policy review.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the liability policy details the rules around borrowing for council. So normally a review occurs at least once every 3 years, and it coincides with a long-term plan. So as with the investment policy, the review has come about because of the consideration for membership within the LGFA. So the purpose of this review is to ensure the provision is made for council to borrow from the LGFA, to provide guarantees to the LGFA and other measures of security. So reviewing the policy, provisions were written into the policy in earlier amendments, and so therefore no further amendments are required in the review at this time. So we're just recommending that the policy is adopted in its present form.
Thank you, Gary. Are there any questions? No questions? Very good. So could I have someone, Councillor Price, is that to move the motion or did you have a question?
Yes.
To move, Clint, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Tuffany. Did you speak to that, Councillor Price?
No, it's all good.
Okay. Councillor Tuffany? No. Any other councillors wish to speak to the motion? Very good. So all those in favour, please say aye.
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 Against? Thank you. Carried unanimously. And our final agenda item on our open agenda is the statement of proposal to join the local government funding agency. So last one, Gary.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Now, to start off with this one, last night when I was reading through it, I noticed there was a material error that does need to be corrected within the office's recommendations. So I'll just highlight recommendation B, endorse option 4. It currently reads, join the LGFA as a non-guaranteeing local authority, and it should actually read as an unrated guaranteeing local authority. They're two very different things, but within the body of the report, we were still looking at option 4 for councillor endorsement. So preparation for the annual plan has identified that the council may have a funding gap of 33 million. It was we originally projected a net debt of around 30 million in the 2018 long-term plan. However, the impact of the pandemic has increased the likelihood that council will need to borrow. So through prudent financial management over a number of years means that residents have enjoyed some of the lowest rates in New Zealand. It also means that borrowing hasn't been required. And as such, we have no material lending facilities in place for the council. So looking at the options that are available and sort of planning for what might happen over the next 12 months, we looked at issuing bonds, borrowing from the bank, and then also borrowing from the local government funding agency. So in review of bonds, the cost and complexity of borrowing by issuing bonds makes it unattractive to council. There's a lot of compliance and legal costs behind it, and for the volume that we're looking at, it doesn't make sense. We conducted a review talking to a number of banks for the level of borrowing projected. And so at that level, council would need to have a committed facility in place. So committed means that the bank has set those funds aside for the borrower. Committed funds aren't free, and so they would cost somewhere between 0.35% and 0.5% per annum for any funds that are undrawn. So if we're looking at $33 million and we've got it committed and we don't borrow over that 12 months, it would cost around $165,000. The rate on funds borrowed would normally be around 1.7%, although that may vary. So if the full 33 million was borrowed, interest would be around 561,000 a year. So that brings us to the LGFA. So the LGFA was established by local councils and the Crown to provide a cheaper avenue for council borrowing. So by pooling resources and sharing the burden of risk, the LGFA has a risk profile similar to that of the New Zealand government. Councils wishing to borrow need to become members of the LGFA. So outside of legal fees, there are no joining membership fees with the LGFA. There's also no obligation to borrow. and it's quite a key factor. As an unrated borrower, the 12-month interest rate was 0.91% at the time the report was written. So with an interest cost of around 300,000 on 33 million, that represents a cost saving of 260,000 per annum over bank lending. So within the LGFA, there are a number of different membership options, which we'll just explore over the next few minutes. So these include joining as a non-guaranteeing local authority. So that means the council doesn't have to provide a financial guarantee to the LGFA. However, borrowing under that membership means we're limited to $20 million. So if we're looking at 33 million, it doesn't quite meet that threshold. By joining as an unrated guaranteeing local authority, council would need to provide a guarantee, but would be able to borrow more than 20 million. So this is our preferred option. It provides us with that flexibility to take on that additional debt if necessary. So council could also join as a principal shareholding authority. So this option is similar to our preferred option, but also involves investing in LGFA shares. So although it does provide council with some influence over the LGFA board and a modest return from the shares held, those shares would likely at this point be funded by be purchased through borrowed funds, and so we don't want to explore it just at this point. But it could be an option for the future if we do end up going down this path. So discussing the guarantee in a bit more detail. So council would need to provide a guarantee of the LGFA of 0.85%. So that means that if the LGFA needed to call on funds, so if there was a shortage of cash from members, for every $100 million that was called, the council would need to provide an additional 850,000 of cash. So this burden is shared across all guaranteeing member councils. The LGFA is well managed though. To put it in perspective, its credit rating is AA+, and so that would indicate the cumulative risk of default that it misses a payment over 15 years is just over 1%. So it's a very, very low risk overall. To date, none of the LGFA style schemes globally, and some of them are over 100 years old too, have ever defaulted on a payment. So it's got a good reputation globally, and they've all been prudently managed to date. So the LGFA itself, how it works is that it typically tests the bond market for investor appetite. So they're looking at what sort of rates the investors are interested in and how much demand there is in the market. So given the size of bond issues, typically an investor will be wholesale. So think of other governments or fund managers or organizations of that caliber. So member councils apply to the LGFA for the amount they need to borrow and the term. So the collective amounts and terms of all the councils will drive the amount and length of bonds issued to the market. The cost of borrowing for each council will always be enough to cover the LGFA running costs and to service interest payments on any bonds issued. The terms of bonds will match up to the maturity dates of the bonds. So depending on the demand or the demand of councils for borrowing, that will dictate how much the LGFA issues out in bonds to the market for investment. So our recommendation is that without some form of borrowing, the council will need to significantly increase rates, which is not realistic in this environment. So on that basis, we're recommending that councils approve council proceeding with public consultation to join the LGFA and endorse option 4, which is joining as an unrated guaranteeing local authority. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Are there any questions? Councillor Mawson.
Just kind of a minor one here, Gary, but kind of by the same token, it's important because it's a legal document here. You've asked us to endorse as the officer option 4, but however you've put them down as A, B, C, D. So you're asking us to endorse option D. Just wanted that clarification, mate.
Option 4. Okay, so within the document, section 8.3, you've got issues, and we've got options under the LGFA. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Yep.
So that's referencing that section 8.3 issue.
Okay, that's cool. I'm looking at 8.6, the options that were actually available.
Oh, okay. Sorry, that was a formatting issue. It automatically came up with those. So sorry, my apologies. So,
but
yeah.
we're on the same page.
Yes.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Crown?
Sorry, I jumped there. I thought you were going to say someone to move the motion. My apologies.
Okay. Well, you can move the motion. That's fine.
Yes.
Do we have a seconder?
I have a feeling perhaps you were going to move on that one. But yeah, no, I'm happy to move the motion. Thank you.
Excellent. And a seconder? Councillor Simpson, thank you very much. Did you wish to speak to the motion, Councillor Crown?
Yeah, sure. Just quickly. I think it's important for us to realise this is just part of the puzzle in regards to us being as financially prudent as possible. Yes, we're going to be going into debt and we need to make sure that we are able to minimise the impact long term of that, and us joining the LGFA is one of those things that we can do. The other point I just wanted to make quickly is that on the other side, we will be, of course, reviewing our expenditure as we go into our long-term planning, which I think is another really important piece of the puzzle. And then further income, as the officer, as Gary said, we're not in a position to greatly increase our rates. So by looking at each of these three aspects, I think we're able to balance our responsibilities financially and to our community best. So that's why I'm speaking in support of the motion today.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I think the paper speaks for itself, and I think ratepayers and council alike recognise that this is a pivotal change in our council's position. But I think ratepayers, through both the reporting, the discussions we've had, that ratepayers can be rest assured that we've taken the most prudent steps to look at the most economical means of securing loans and the most economical long-term costs calculations for repaying that debt. So I think it's a good proposal. It's the best option available to us in the current context, and it provides us some security through our lending options going forward. So I certainly speak in favour of the proposal.
Very good. Now, we just will confirm the wording for the change to be, and then Councillor Taylor has indicated he'd like to speak. Gary, can you please confirm that that is now correct?
Unrated guaranteeing local authority. Yes, that's correct, Madam Mayor.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Taylor.
Thank you, Worship. One of the first things was I'm very pleased that Gary corrected that and also gave a good explanation as to what an unrated guaranteeing authority means, because often, as many of us know, if you're going to guarantee something, you have to put up an asset, and in this case we don't necessarily have to do that. I think the other point I'd like to raise is that we have been Napier has been in a wonderful position for many years, and we talk about not having had to borrow. We have not had to externally borrow. We have borrowed internally from our own funds for many years, and that's because of prudent behaviour in the past. And I think that this move that we are now doing in joining the LGFA or going out to consultation to join the LGFA is just another prudent financial management indication that this council is doing. And as Gary mentioned, there's no future obligation that we need to borrow. So if we can go back in the future to how we performed in the past, then our borrowing may just become internal in the future, and that's something that we can look forward to. So I support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. We have had 3 speak in support of the motion and make very good comments as to why this is the best way forward. Did anyone wish to speak against it? Okay, I will therefore put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And against? Thank you very much. Passed unanimously. That brings us to the conclusion of our agenda. Can I have someone to move us into public excluded? Thank you, Councillor Tapani, seconded by Councillor Taylor. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Aye. Carried. And we will take a brief, what time are we? 10-minute break for everyone to go and just have a breath of fresh air, and we'll then re-adjourn for our public exclude.